Welcome to the Parkinson's Project podcast. The Parkinson's Project seeks to erase the stigma associated with Parkinson's disease while empowering and inspiring those dealing with the affliction to live life to the fullest. The Parkinson's Project aspires to build an engaged, supportive community while examining the journey of living with Parkinson's disease through a positive, empowering perspective. Here is your host of the Parkinson's Project podcast, Tim McNiff.
Hi, once again, everybody. I am Tim McNiff, and welcome to episode 24 of the Parkinson's Project podcast. This is where we seek to engage with everybody, all the people who are working every day out there in the front lines to find a cure, to help others live their best life, or to create a better path for themselves or maybe someone that they love. Now, if you're familiar with our format, we try to keep our discussions to about 30 minutes in length, but if we are in the midst of a compelling conversation, we do reserve the right to extend that conversation to a longer format. We'll just take that episode and we'll put it into a couple of episodes. What we want to do is we want to deliver tangible, beneficial content to all who engage with us, with the end goal being, of course, to put ourselves out of business when there is no longer a reason to talk about PD. And with that, it is my great pleasure to welcome to episode 24 of the Parkinson's Project podcast, Mr. John Lehr. John is the president and CEO of the Parkinson's Foundation. He has nearly 3 decades of nonprofit fundraising and management experience with a strong focus in the voluntary healthcare and medical research sectors. Now, during his tenure at the foundation, John has overseen several major initiatives, some of which we will be discussing presently, but his appearance also coincides with November being National Caregiver Month. John Lehr, welcome to the Parkinson's Project podcast.
Thank you so much, Tim. It's a pleasure to be here.
Great to have you. This is fun. I had a great time with your staff working to negotiate to meet your exorbitant. No, you didn't charge us anything to be here, but this is a big deal for us. We are still learning the landscape. We've been doing this podcast for about a year, and I for this ad nauseum to the people who follow this podcast, but I knew painfully little about Parkinson's disease before I came into this. So I'm still learning the landscape. So if you would, could you just give us kind of a brief overview of how you got here, the path that led you to the Parkinson's Foundation?
Yeah, so thank you very much. So I came to the Parkinson's Foundation in 2017. I was hired as the CEO of the organization following a merger of 2 smaller organizations, one based in Miami and one based in New York. Those 2 organizations had been operating in parallel for many decades, going back to the 1950s. And it wasn't until really about 2000 that they started to talk about, should we get together, merge, join forces, and become one organization, and all the benefits that accrue from the efficiencies of being one organization. It took a little bit of time, but through force of will, a number of the board members of both the respective organizations got a merger together. And then they wanted to make sure to go out and hire a new CEO to merge the organization together and to develop a strategic plan and a path forward. And I was fortunate enough to be chosen to be that CEO. So I've been here for 6 years, and it's really, truly a pleasure. The foundation represents the 1 million Americans who are living with this disease and all of their family members and loved ones. And so coming into the foundation at just a pivotal time has been very exciting, and we've been able to do a lot of things on behalf of people living with this disease, and it's been extremely rewarding.
Well, the list of your accomplishments is quite impressive. And as I said just a moment ago, like many people, my first awareness of Parkinson's disease came when Michael J. Fox had to go public and say, I've got this. And now he has a foundation that does bear his name, but that is not your organization. What do we need to know about the Parkinson's Foundation?
Sure. So first of all, let me just say about Michael J. Fox, there's probably been no greater force for recognition and awareness of Parkinson's as a disease since Michael J. Fox announced that he had Parkinson's. Michael J. Fox is a little unusual in the sense that he has young onset Parkinson's. He was diagnosed in his 20s. Only about 5% of people have what we call young onset Parkinson's, which is Parkinson's that's diagnosed before the age of 50. Most people develop Parkinson's much later in life. But Michael J. Fox was really just a tremendous force for good, has been a tremendous force for good over the years. His foundation is different than ours, although we collaborate on many different things. We collaborate on research, we collaborate on care, and we collaborate on advocacy. So we have lots of interaction with Michael J. Fox. Fox has historically focused on drug discovery and development, trying to bring new therapies forward for Parkinson's disease, which is a challenging task, to be frank. Parkinson's is a very complex disease. We can talk maybe a little bit more about that. Our organization, prior to the merger, was one organization was focused on basic research. The other one was focused on really care. Both organizations were focused on education, patient education, professional education. We've taken the best of all of that, all of those different programs. And so we have three core mission areas: research, care, and education. And so one of the things that we have done over time is really bolster our research mission. I think a lot of people think, oh, Fox is the organization that does research. Parkinson's Foundation spends a lot. In fact, most of our mission spend, or a majority of our mission spend, is on research. But we're doing things that are complementary of each other, not overlapping with each other.
Interesting. And I think this may dovetail into my next question, because since your time with the foundation, fundraising revenue has grown each year by double digits, which in itself is quite impressive. And I wonder, is that the reason why the focus has been on fundraising? Because you know that you need that for the research, and the research is where we're going to find the cure?
Yeah, so I'm on record as saying money equals mission. I know a lot of times people, some people are wary of fundraising. It's not always the easiest thing to do, but fundraising is the lifeblood of any nonprofit organization. We just simply have to have funds to support our mission programs. I champion our fundraising team. They do an outstanding job. Our program team are truly appreciative and grateful for all the work that they do. The more money you have, the more funds you're able to raise, the more you're able to do on behalf of your community. And the more imaginative you can be in thinking about programs that might have great reach and impact. I come from a fundraising background. It's how I started my career. And I've worked in different parts of the fundraising activities. And, I say, we are asked, we've done really well over the last 6 years. As you say, we've had double-digit growth. We are aspirational to be a much larger organization. We'd love to see ourselves at $100 million in the next 5 years. It's not just because we want to be a $100 million organization. It's because with $100 million, we can just do so much more for people living with this disease. That's our main objective when it comes to fundraising.
And as we've talked about on this program before, unfortunately, this disease shows no signs of letting up. I mean, we're only welcoming, unfortunately, more people into the community. So I would think that fundraising is essential.
Yeah, so as I mentioned earlier, about 1 million Americans are living with Parkinson's disease. We've just completed an incidence study that's going to show that the number of people who are diagnosed annually with Parkinson's is much greater than we originally thought. We used to say it was about 60,000 individuals per year. It's now upwards of 90,000 individuals per year. So people say, well, why is that? And I think the answer is that our population is aging, and the number one risk factor for Parkinson's disease is age. There's a genetic cause, and clearly there seems to be an environmental cause, but really aging is the main cause of Parkinson's disease. And the fact is, we lose dopamine neurons as we age, and so it makes for a very complex disease. It's a brain disease. It's a whole body disease, really, and it's complicated. And because of the complexity of the disease, we need to invest in the underlying causes and basic biology of the disease. At the same time, we're trying to find new and better therapies for the disease, as well as make sure that people have the best health care and quality of life as possible. So all of that means we need more resources for Parkinson's than we've had in the past. It's going to take a lot more of that to get to where we want, which is ultimately a cure for Parkinson's disease. That's going to take hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars. And the urgency is now, right? People are suffering from this disease, and we need to make sure that people understand with greater resources, we can move much faster.
And we need to move much faster. Hence this conversation today. You came to this role, John, with a lot of experience. You come in with an agenda. I'm guessing you came in with things you wanted to do. You've been in the job for 6 years. Is there ever one of those situations where you just go, people are missing the message on this, or they still think we're this, but we're actually that? What is, in your opinion, perhaps the biggest misconception regarding the Parkinson's Foundation?
Yeah, thanks for that question. I would say a couple of things. One, we are a much larger organization today than we were just 6 years ago. And we are a much larger organization compared to the two legacy organizations. So that means we can do so much more than we've done before. At the time of the merger, we were really a Miami and New York based organization with some outposts in Chicago and a few other places. Today, we are a truly national organization. We have 17 chapters across the country. We've divided ourselves into 5 regions. We've doubled the staff. I always say that with some caution. We need to have the staff to run all our programs and do all of our fundraising. And we're very mindful of our expense on staffing and administration. So our mission ratio has actually increased fairly significantly since the merger, even with the increase in staff. So just to show that we're really an efficient organization. But we're a much larger organization. It's really Michael J. Fox and the Parkinson's Foundation. We're the 2 largest Parkinson's organizations in the world. We have every intention and expectation that we're going to be a much larger organization as we go forward. One of the things I would say about the Parkinson's community is that there are many people who are affected by this disease. The million Americans living with the disease, but also all their family members, their loved ones, their neighbors, their friends. And so I think we can do a lot more to raise awareness, raise funds. I think one of the misconceptions about Parkinson's is just the urgency of it. People are struggling. This disease can affect people at all ages, but people living with this disease, sometimes have to leave their careers. It has a really challenging aspects for relationships, between husbands and wives. It affects family members. It affects generations. There's a genetic component to the disease. So if you have the disease, you worry about whether your children or your grandchildren might have the disease. So there's a real urgency to getting to solutions for Parkinson's, and that's really what we're all about.
Earlier, I said that we were going to talk about the initiatives, and I think we're doing some of that you brought to the Parkinson's Foundation in your time here. But you're also looking forward, because you have to. It's always about moving forward. Can you give us an overview of your 4-year strategic plan?
Sure. So we, as I mentioned, we focus on research, care, and education. In research, we've done a couple of things. So we've always funded basic research. Our idea there is that we still need to understand this disease at a molecular level. But what we focus on are young investigators. We're trying to build a pipeline of scientists who are going to make the discoveries today and in the future. Going into research is challenging. There's often not a lot of money, and a lot of people who are graduating from graduate school with degrees in neurology struggle sometimes to find the funding that they need to get on their feet. So we really focus a lot on young investigators in the basic science side of the equation. More recently, we have implemented a genetics initiative to provide genetic testing and counseling to up to 15,000 individuals with Parkinson's disease. 20 years ago, there wasn't much of an understanding that there was even a genetic component to Parkinson's, but we now know that somewhere between 10 and 15% of people have a genetic component to their disease. And what's interesting is there are a number of pharmaceutical companies and biotech companies who are developing therapeutics, new drugs that are targeted at those mutations. So it's really important for people to know if they have one of those genetic mutations. And it's also important because we're going to need to enroll people with those mutations in clinical trials. That's the only way we're going to advance therapies. More recently, we've entered into an agreement with Parkinson's UK, a very similarly sized and same mission organization in Great Britain, to do drug discovery and development. Parkinson's UK has established a platform to identify and evaluate promising new therapies for Parkinson's disease. They've invested in 11 therapies. 4 of those are symptom controlling. 7 of those are addressing the underlying defect of the disease. And so we're entering that effort as a full partner. and are going to be contributing millions of dollars to that initiative over the next few years. In care, we have what is regarded as the largest center of excellence network or global care network in the world. We have 51 centers. These are the very best academic medical centers that are providing care to people with Parkinson's around the world. Mostly focused here in the United States, Canada, but we have 14 centers overseas. So those centers are really, first of all, just caring for a lot of people living with Parkinson's here in the United States, but they're also among the best centers, and they're identifying new treatment modalities. And the idea is, let's take those treatment modalities and disseminate them broadly across all the care providers that are helping people with Parkinson's. We also do a lot of patient outcome studies, right, to see how we can improve care, whether it's in the mental health space, in rehabilitation, and palliative care. So our centers of excellence are really fundamental in helping us move those different patient outcome studies forward. In education, we are, I think, the trusted source for all things Parkinson's. Our website, our digital, print, and online materials, social media materials. We believe that it's critical to get out evidence-based information. So we won't publish or say anything unless it's been peer-reviewed and validated in the scientific literature. There's a lot of information out there on the internet that can frighten people and scare people. So we really encourage people to go to our website, parkinson.org, or call our helpline, 800-4PD-INFO, because you'll be assured that you're getting the best and most accurate information on all things Parkinson's. We also provide a lot of community education around the country, both in person and virtual. And lastly, there are a lot of people who care for people with Parkinson's. Unfortunately, a lot of care providers don't get a lot of training in neurological diseases, and specifically in Parkinson's disease. Parkinson's requires some special training. There's a lot of things to know about drugs and how to make sure that people are taking their drugs on time and are compliant with their medical regimen. And often a lot of providers just don't get that training. So we spend a lot of time providing for opportunities for clinicians, whether it's physicians, nurses, PTs, OTs, speech, et cetera, to get extra training and learn how to care for people with Parkinson's. So those are our broad mission areas. And, again, coming back to it, 6 years ago, we had less money to spend on those things. And 6 years later, because of our fundraising activities, we're able to not only invest in those programs, but to really begin to innovate around those programs.
I got to admit, and I'm not just saying this because you're here and we're having this conversation, but I mean, there's such an authenticity to what you're saying. Your command of the facts, your command of the situation, the working pieces here. I wonder, let's go off script for just a moment. What was your background? I mean, that kind of led you into this, because you seem to have that rare combination of, you seem like you could be in the lab, but you also can be in the room, rubbing shoulders and maybe on the golf course, raising money.
Well, I appreciate that. I will say I was a history major in college, and then I got a master's in American history in college. So I was headed in a totally different direction, and I served in the Peace Corps. And when I came back from the Peace Corps, I got a job at the University of Pennsylvania in the medical school. And I had never been exposed to medicine. I wasn't really that interested in science. I will tell you, from then on, I've taken to it like a moth to flame. I worked at Penn for 4 years, and then I went on to the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia, where early in my career, one of the things people said I had a knack for was taking fairly complex science and being able to boil it down for lay people like me to understand. And so, I think science can be really complex and hard to understand, but it can also be really accessible if you think about it in certain ways. And, we rely on great people, donors, and volunteers to help us. And I think if we can translate the science and what we're trying to do into understandable terms, we're going to be much better off at it. So we really spend a lot of time in trying to what are we really trying to do in conveying that to people?
Well, I feel like there's a lot of places you could be with your skill set. I feel very glad that you are where you are for the people who have this affliction.
Very kind.
Doing my research on you, I came across something called PD generation. What is PD generation?
Yeah, so PD generation is one of our new programs. We launched it about 4 years ago. The reason why we did is, as I was saying earlier, 20, 30 years ago, most people did not know or think that there was any genetic connection to Parkinson's disease. As it turned out, there was this one family, the Torse family, who were from Italy, and they had a broad diaspora around the world. And they had a gene in their family that caused people with Parkinson's, caused people to have Parkinson's and to have a really tough course of Parkinson's, affecting cognition. A physician in New Jersey discovered that and started to explore that and realized there must be a genetic component to this. And you'll see that unfortunately, in many families, a grandfather has it, an uncle has it. There's a lot of familial Parkinson's. So we think that familial Parkinson's is related to genetics. And within the last 20 years, we've identified about 7 genetic mutations that are implicated in the diagnosis of Parkinson's. There are 2 main ones, GBA and LRRK2. What's interesting about those mutations is, I'll take GBA. GBA has a lot more cognitive involvement and LRRK2 has less so. So, Parkinson's is not just a movement disorder, it also affects cognition and mood and mental health, many things in mental health, GI, it's really a whole body system. But when you're approaching it from a clinical perspective, that there's differences between different genetic mutations, one with greater cognitive involvement and one with less, that gives more tools to the clinicians who are caring for this disease. So that's one important aspect of our PD generation. The other aspect is, as I was saying, there are a lot of biotech and pharma companies out there that are looking at therapies or new drugs that are targeted at those 2 specific mutations, GBA and LRRK2. And that's a great opportunity for us. But most people don't know if they have a genetic component. They don't know if they have GBA or LRRK2. So we started PD generation to test up to 15,000 individuals to see whether they had a genetic mutation. In addition to testing, we're also providing counseling, because you could get a positive test for genetics, or you could not get one. And we want people to know what the implications of that are. If you do have a genetic mutation and it's related to your Parkinson's disease, then we want to know that, and we want you to be aware of clinical trials that are coming up, because the more people we have who we can enroll in clinical trials, the faster we're going to be able to develop new drugs, around those genetic mutations for people with Parkinson's. And as happens in science all over the place or all the time, one drug that is targeted very specifically at one population may be, relatable to other people who don't have that mutation. It may have benefits for many more people beyond the initial focus group that you're looking at. So PD generation is a terrific example of a type of program that, with greater resources today, that we were able to launch. I think 6 years ago, it would have been beyond us. But today, with greater resources, we're able to undertake that. We've gotten a lot of support, generous support from individual donors and corporations. And today, we have 6,400 people enrolled, already tested in that study, which is really phenomenal. In fact, last month, or let's say, I think it was September, we don't have the October numbers in yet, but in September, we had the most people recruited for that study. We have 100 sites that are recruiting people for PD Gene. And we're also, it's focused exclusively on people with Parkinson's now, but we're also living with Parkinson's now, but we're also going to open it up to people who may be children or grandchildren or nieces or nephews, so that they can get tested as well.
Wow, fantastic. November is National Caregiver Month. And we actually coincided your appearance to be in coordination with that. Can you touch on the role that and you touched on it a little bit earlier, when you talked about the relationships and how difficult it can be for the people. So can you talk about the vital role that caregivers play and the resources perhaps that you might have to assist them in that role?
Yeah, I think this is one of the many unknowns about Parkinson's disease. Parkinson's is an incredibly tough diagnosis, and people living with it, it's a progressive degenerative neurological disease. And right now we only have medications that can help control the symptoms. So it's a really tough disease for people who are living with it. It's also very tough for their loved ones. And typically it's a spouse or a brother or sister or somebody in the family who becomes the primary caregiver, care partner. And the burden on those folks is considerable, particularly as the disease enters its final stages. where people may not be able to move. They may not be able to do all of their activities of daily living, showering, feeding, dressing. So the burden on the care partner just grows steadily over time. And not only do they have to be there, to help with the physical, but it takes an emotional toll. It sometimes takes a financial toll because sometimes people have to step away from their jobs to really be a full-time care provider. So the Parkinson's Foundation recognizes the challenges that care partners, caregivers face. And so we put together a whole host of programs to say, look, hey, first of all, we hear you. We know the issues that you're going through. We have a lot of materials. We've created a whole package of materials for people who are care partners. There's courses that they can take. They can just become experts in how to care for their partners, but also how to take care of themselves. And we also have a number of conferences, meetings for people who are care partners so that they can come together. There's support groups for care partners as well. Care partners are so critical to the care of people with Parkinson's disease, just as much as their healthcare providers, maybe even more so. So we need to give them all the resources and tools so that they can do all the things that they need to do for the person living with Parkinson's, but also for themselves. It's a real challenge.
Amen. Well said. John, we always want our podcast to have a tangible component, something of a call to action that people can get out of this episode and say, hey, this is something I can do right now to improve my situation or perhaps improve the situation of someone that they love. So for the people who engage with this content, what would be that CTA? What would you want them to do as a result of seeing you and hearing your message today?
When I came into the Parkinson's space, and I had known somebody, a good family friend of ours had Parkinson's. So from when I was a little kid, I was aware of Parkinson's. When you talk to people, almost everybody you talk to knows somebody, my uncle, my friend, my neighbor, my coworker who has Parkinson's. And I think there's no greater way to show your care and concern for them for getting involved, whether it's as a volunteer coming out to one of our activities. We have activities all across the country, whether you want to come out and just support the team, whether you want to help fundraise for the organization, whether you want to join one of our volunteer committees. We have 17 chapters across the country. We have advisory boards. So I would say get involved as much as you possibly can. And I know people have time constraints, so I appreciate that. But we have our signature walk program is called Moving Day. And whenever anybody comes out for Moving Day, it's amazing how touched they are by it. I mean, it's families and friends and, all these stakeholders coming out to support people living with this disease. So it's very emotionally uplifting for people to participate in it. So I really encourage people to become volunteers and donors to the organization. Some people can give a small amount to support our programs, and we're appreciative of every dollar. And if you can give more money to support programs in a larger way, we're grateful for that as well. So there are so many ways to interact with the organization, both as a volunteer, as a donor. But even if it's not in either one of those capacities, just showing love and concern for people who are living with Parkinson's and lending a helping hand is really just critical.
John, we've just celebrated our 1-year anniversary here, and I was brought into this by a gentleman by the name of Pat Forcia, who's the executive producer of this podcast, and Pat has Parkinson's. And so we've kind of entered this not really kind of knowing where we were going to go with it, but what we want to do is we want to become a voice, that helps people get a message out. So I just want to say to you, great having you here. Thank you for your time. Thank you for the work that you're doing. But know that if you've got something, if you've got some sort of initiative, we have our schedule that we do, but we'll break that schedule. If there's some way we can help you amplify your message or get that out, I want you to know that we're here and we're here to work with you.
Well, Tim, I really appreciate that. It's very kind of you, and I'm sure we're going to take you up on that offer for sure.
Well, it's been a great thing to be a part of. John Lehr is the president and chief executive officer of the Parkinson's Foundation. John, on behalf of everyone at the Parkinson's Project, we thank you for everything that you're doing for the people in the PD community. We thank you for this opportunity to learn more about you and the organization. I want you to be well, and I do look forward to reconnecting with you in the future.
Thank you so much, Tim. I really appreciate it.
All right, John, hang around. We'll be right back with you in a moment. The Parkinson's Project seeks to be a place where you can come for a range of information about PD and to find support for yourself or perhaps for a loved one. And we encourage you to check us out on Facebook at the Parkinson's Project And you can find us at the Parkinson's Project Podcast wherever you're going to find your favorite podcast. Check us out and rate us so that we can continue to grow and give support in the ongoing effort to eradicate this affliction. And again, to once in the future, put us out of business when there's no reason to talk about Parkinson's disease. This has been the Parkinson's Project Podcast. For executive producer Pat Versia, I am Tim McNiff. I want to thank you for joining us. We look forward to meeting and working with all of you as we seek to build a loving, supportive, and empowering community through all aspects of the Parkinson's Project.
Thank you for engaging with the Parkinson's Project Podcast. Be sure to look for more content on the Parkinson's Project Facebook page, and we'll see you right here on the next edition of the Parkinson's Project Podcast.